Hi, my name is Harriet, and I go by H.M. Baker, and I'm an artist who works with performance, film, choreography, and more recently print and installation. And I'm very interested in power and the way that it's used in contemporary society, and that could be in so many ways. And most recently, I've been thinking about choreography and labor, and how the body is in constant conversation with these kinds of power structures. I mean, firstly, I really love Francis Elise's work, and there's something about it that has this kind of like ineffable mystery to it, which I think is so beautiful and very poetic. And then, but for me, this work in particular is very connected to this kind of longing for wilderness, which I think is something different to just saying like a longing for nature or being more connected to nature. It's like a longing for something that is kind of out of control, out of human control. And I think, and the fox is so much this like symbol specifically for London or the UK, I guess, that it is this creature that exists in a human environment without, somehow it has a wilderness within it, and I think that's quite special. Quite a special thing to be able to try and capture in a work. So yeah, there's something about this longing which I find very exciting and very interesting. I think so. I mean, some recent works that I've been exploring have had the figure or the creature of the bird and like kind of interwoven into the research and in the outcomes as well. And that was partially my own desire for wilderness and my own desire to be kind of like released from the architectural structure of an urban environment, and the bird is that kind of, you know, it's basically like the most ancient metaphor of all as a way to be kind of like freed from that. It's not saying it's not to say that any kind of physical labor or like material labor has been somehow superseded by another form of labor. It's just that there's another layer to capitalism now, which is this layer of cognitive labor, which is using creativity, and it's using any kind of mental capacity and stretching it to create surface value and to kind of create another mode of labouring that is very, very prevalent in capital cities, as well as physical labour, because it doesn't, it's just the stratification of labour is expanded. Like urban environments, we create a kind of hierarchy of what a job is, and what your job is, what your title is, and it gives you this status. And I'm really interested in how those job titles then affect your status and therefore your relationship to those people around you. And I think it's important to use the body as a way to challenge that somehow, and to kind of unpick layers of performativity that come with creating these kinds of roles and these kinds of status hierarchies, which are there for, they have a purpose, and they're there to kind of create a certain type of order and create a kind of quite oppressive structure that feels that can isolate people within it, which therefore stops people talking and resonating with each other, and therefore probably suppresses any kind of change that might need to happen. I used them to begin with just to create the stage. I just really needed a very simple way to create and demarcate a space, a kind of cheap ready-made material. I kind of chose the carpet tiles because they function as the membrane that is between your body and the architecture that you're in. Carpet in particular, especially in an office, is a way to regulate the space. So it's like, it has a sonic dampening effect. So it means that sounds don't carry so much, so you don't get any echoes, which means you're less distracted, which means you're a more productive worker. To me, they also function in the way that architecture functions, which is like the role of the choreographer in a way. I was excited that it was in Bank because I do have such an interest into like the history of finance and the history of the architecture of capitalism, and so it's really, really an appropriate place to be situated. And I mean, even on my street, where the building is, where our studio is, there's the site of where one of the first like open outcry trading floors ever existed, which is Lloyd's Coffee House. And there's just some really interesting historical artifacts that you can see, I mean, everywhere that you walk around there. But on top of that, I find that I think I'm mostly interested in just watching people go about their day and seeing what, what do you do when you're walking to get your coffee at lunchtime, or I don't know, I'm just very interested in kind of being a people watcher and watching people. Maybe I'm part of the surveillance now as well, which is an interesting way to think about it, I guess. Kathy Weeks' proposal is really one of imagination. So it's like, what would life, how can we design a society, a functional, cooperative society without like the kinds of jobs that we've designed, or like the kinds of work that we've designed for ourselves. Like we can't have no work because we have to like eat and sleep and house each other and care for each other, and like I think care and work get conflated, and I think there's a lot of work though that exists like in this David Graeber kind of definition of bullshit jobs that doesn't need to exist. But I think there's this kind of idea that if you have people too idle, they may dream of another world, and there's a lot of people invested in maintaining the world as it is, so people who are, in positions of power don't want other people to have a lot of time to dream. I'm really interested in this this distinction between the work self and the private self, because I think of jobs and their titles as a kind of like characterization, or you would kind of, I think there's like I think there's a very obvious distinction between how we act in certain different environments. A lot of people talk about code switching and like being in a different environment and knowing how you have to behave in that environment as a way to keep yourself safe necessarily, or to fit in, or to as a way to kind of like reduce the friction between the external structure and how you might feel inside. And so for me it was like interesting to use the glasses with a camera attached, like a little spy cam, and so that gave us like the POV of one of the dancers, and so that was kind of like, that gave us this kind of like window into the perspective of that dancer who was also performing as a worker, and And for me, yeah, it was just an interesting moment to like explore viewpoints and how like there's this kind of like veneer on the work itself, which I think this slightly more like cinematic footage gave us. You know, this kind of idealistic view of how, you know, of the productive worker, and then the POV spy cam or the glasses cameras gave us a much more like frenetic, intense view of maybe like, you know, you can imagine that was probably, it gave us a kind of a better sense of how the dancers were feeling or moving, or any, just a very different sensibility through the choice of camera. Yeah, I'm always drawn to humor in work and artwork in particular. I think of it as a great way to subvert and address certain rigidities that exist within those environments. And I think maybe it is just a personal thing, you know. I use humor as a defense mechanism, so it's often like a way to like play with that as well, and using humor in this very it's kind of a window. I think it's a good way to give someone an access point to an idea without being too direct. And I think you're right, though, that it also does like balance the mundanity of a lot of the subject matter, and point to the absurdity of it, because I think humor can be a really, really useful tool for playing with these like quite oppressive and rigid structures, because it kind of tickles it. And I think tickling something is a really good way to like to expose it as well, because I think a lot of I think oppression doesn't like humor in some way.